Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 98 podcast. I'm your host, Kiran, and today I'm joined by Tessa to talk about sustainable agriculture. For more information on Tessa and today's topic, please follow us on Instagram at 98.podcast. Check out our website and check out our LinkedIn to connect with us professionally. Welcome to the show, Tessa.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
We're excited to have you on. So before we begin, I just wanted to have you introduce yourself a little bit. Like where did you study? What did you study? What you're up to now? All of that fun stuff.
Yes. So last year I graduated from the University of San Francisco. And I graduated with a major in environmental studies and a minor in urban agriculture. So, going off that, this past year, I've kind of just been relaxing a little bit because, the pandemic and stuff. But during those 4 years, I was very much into agriculture, the environment, learning a lot. So, yeah. I'm originally from Tacoma, Washington. But yeah, been living in San Francisco since 2016.
Nice. So what made you want to study or like pursue your higher education and focus on agriculture in particular?
So what got me into it originally when I went to University of San Francisco when I was my first semester there, I was I wasn't declared any major. And I remember I was in a math class and last minute before classes started, I was like, nope, not going to take this math class. Like, I don't care. And I got into environment in the society. And that class kind of changed my whole perspective on the environment, agriculture, basically worldview too. My professor was great. Greg, shout out to him. And I remember after halfway through taking that class, I was like, I'm gonna be environmental studies major because I was like, this is what I want to do. This is great. Like, this is so awesome. So yeah, that kind of changed my thinking. We learned a lot in that class. I'll definitely talk about things that I learned in that class today. And then from there, just kept going, just kept learning and learning new things. And then I got into agriculture and I started working at the the USF garden and just took as many agriculture classes as I could, worked summers there, did a TA ship there for extra credits to graduate on time. So it's been cool.
Nice. Do you recommend the program for anyone who's interested in applying or maybe thinking of switching into it?
I would recommend it. I don't know. My views on school are mixed. So I love school and I think that education is amazing, obviously. But University of San Francisco specifically is very expensive, but they do offer a lot of scholarships, which is great. But I would, if you're already there and you have resources, but if you don't have resources your money wise, I would say there's other ways of learning about environment in farming and agriculture. You don't have to go to a really expensive school, but yeah, I liked it. but school's weird like that,
Yeah, it sucks that it's so expensive, but yeah, just to touch on what you said, definitely multiple options to select from. But if you are there, you have the financial support scholarship, definitely check out the program, right? Because it seems like it's really amazing.
No, it's cool. And it's even if you don't want to major in it, the minor is cool too. So
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so I want to just jump into a quick little point before we kind of dive deeper into this. How does agriculture impact our environment? Just for me who doesn't know anything and for anyone listening who maybe never considered this before.
Okay, so First of all, the environment is like all around us. We are the environment. So to say, so anything impacts the environment, right?
Right.
And agriculture is the environment because we all are the environment. Everything around us, everything. So agriculture is performed because the environment is there for us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And to dive more into that question, we should go back and look at the history of our modern day agriculture.
Right.
So, first, I would like to say that, well, another thing I would like to say is that everything that I'm gonna say, like in the next few sentences or next few minutes, is based on a Eurocentric like viewpoint of agriculture. The agriculture we see today stems from Western society, right? It's not like this is very, and I'll talk about it more, but agriculture is a way of colonialism, imperialism, and the modern day agriculture we see all stems from that.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the Industrial Revolution was when we first saw like that was technically the second wave of like agricultural revolutions. The first wave being like 10,000 years ago when our society, meaning European society, went from nomads to like husbandry. So like starting to have cattle and like having like sections of land where they would have little crops, you know. Mm-hmm. And then from that moving into the Industrial Revolution in like the 18th century, like late 17th, early 18th century, we start to see more uses of like horses for like tilling and just a wider spread use of like farming techniques.
Right.
And then you fast forward, and that goes along with like everything being industrialized too. So everything industrialized meaning like we switched over from a handcrafted society to a society that's heavily like relying on mechanics, big factories, all that. And then fast forward to like the 50s, you have the Green Revolution, and that's kind of where things start to get crazy, crazier for agriculture, because that's when we start to see, well, things started to get more crazy with the nitrogen. So when Haber and Bosch created like I guess you can say synthetic nitrogen. That okay, wait, Kiran, I gotta start over.
Okay, got you. I know you started talking about chemicals, and I was like, "Whoa!"
I know that got too crazy. Wait, I need
no, for sure.
I was like, this is getting out of control.
Yeah, I think go from when you said it started getting crazy, like around the 50s, and then maybe go from there, because I think that was.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna go from when I said the Green Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
So the Green Revolution is like in the 1950s, 60s, and that's when you start to see a global increase in crop production. So that's when you see massive crop production of wheat, corn, soy, rice, all of those things that we probably all eat day to day. Like those are the main things a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people eat. And so the Green Revolution and technology started to pick up too. So you started to see like irrigation, right? That's when irrigation all started. So you start to see larger farms. You start to see that's when you start to see a lot of pollution stems from the Green Revolution, right? So that's when you start to have a lot of the negative side effects come from then. And so there's a higher use of pesticides and fertilizers and all those great things. And another thing that happened then was the use of nitrogen, and that's called like the Haber-Bosch process. And so there's two types of nitrogen. I won't go too deeply into the science behind it because partially, like, I don't want to say anything that's not true.
Right.
And also it gets confusing. But
Right.
so there's nitrogen that's like in the air, right? And then the soil, there's nitrogen in the soil. So plants need nitrogen to grow. And Harper and Bosch basically made like an artificial nitrogen. They figured out a way to do it so they can just start putting it on the plants. So that created a whole nother thing because now we're putting a whole bunch of nitrogen in our plants because they're going to grow, right? But that washes off into our waterways, which then creates a lot of nutrients in the water, and you start to get things like euphoриfication, which is like when there's a lot of nitrogen and there starts to be a lot of algae blooms, and then other things in the water can't live. Overall, it's bad because you have a lot of nutrients and it starts to pollute like natural waterways. And so you get that from the green revolution. And then also with the green revolution, you start to see things like monocultures start to become more and more popular. And if you don't know what a monoculture is, that is where basically it's all just one crop. So if you ever like drive through like land where there's a lot of farms, you'll see like all those cornfields or like, you see just like all the same crop, right? That's all a monoculture. And
so was that was that not a thing back in like the original farming communities of like doing one crop in like one field, or was it more like they used to grow everything very close together, or like what did it used to look like?
Yeah, so in Europe, they still, a lot of farms do this, but there's also farms that don't, but they do crop rotations because you can't, so soil can only like is going to get ruined if you plant the same crop over and over again. Because when you're planting the same crop over and over again, it's like the same pests are going to come, right? The same bugs that like to eat that one plant are going to come and eat all, and they just like, it's a free-for-all. It's all the same thing. So they're just going to eat all of it. And then there's no diversification in the soil. So you all like the plants, the roots are at the same level. And so the soil like gets too used to the level that they're at. And like, cause you need like balance in everything. You need like really long roots to separate the soil and short, like it's just like anything. You need like a lot of diversity. And so there are like, back in the day, and they still do this, like you have crop rotations where you rotate like this crop, and this crop, so you're not like every season using the same one. But there are monocultures that don't do that, and they just have to put more pesticides and all that fun.
Yeah, I remember just, this is random, but I remember as a kid learning about strawberries or like watermelons or whatever, and people used to be like, oh, it's not in season, right? Now we're at the point where everything's always in season. So does this have to do with the fact that like we're using more pesticides, or we're doing this like monoculture type of thing where like, does this tie into that of like we're constantly growing the same thing, that's why it's in season? Like how is that, how did that change, I guess, is my question.
So there's so much information.
Oh my God. I know, lay it on me. I want to know.
But so with that, they could be monocultures. They probably are. If you have your big farms, it's definitely a monoculture. Most definitely. But with that is because we have a global like trade of like our food and stuff. So your watermelons are coming from like across the country or like from Mexico. I don't know where watermelon. I should probably know. I don't. But and that's a whole nother thing that's bad for our environment, because now you have like a huge, your carbon footprint is like very long because you're getting a watermelon that's from like South America. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like wherever you're at, so you're getting like all your products are from different places, and that's a whole nother issue. But we love watermelons, so we want watermelons all the time. Why can't we?
Yeah. I know. I was just wondering if it's like, oh, we're just finding new ways to grow it in our community, but nah, it's just like being imported and exported more.
That could be a thing, because there are new new ways of growing things like inside, like vertical farming and stuff. But most likely it's not.
Yeah, I figured. Okay. So okay, we touched on a lot right now, right? With everything.
I kind of went on a little.
Yeah, no, but that was good. Do you want to touch a little bit about, well, we talked a lot about plants, but what about livestock? Tell me all about that.
Livestock. Yeah, so in my freshman year class that inspired me to be an environmentalist, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Or take on that role. I read this chapter from, I have it right here.
Yeah.
So it's the chapter called "The Most Unjustly Maligned." Oh my god, I can't say this word. Of all animals, whatever, I can't say that word. It's from Diet for a New America by John Robbins, 1987. So in this chapter, basically they just talk about pigs, and like it gives like a very in-depth like look into what factory farming looks like, and like how the animals are treated, and how disgusting it is. It's kind of like a scare. It scared me. I stopped eating meat for a while after that. I was like, I'm vegetarian. But that one really like it did it. It was like the point where I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be eating meat anymore. And there's a lot of different reasons why meat is bad. Wait, I shouldn't say that. Meat isn't bad. Like, eating meat is fine. If you want to eat meat, eat meat. It's how it's done in the US that is terrible. So in factory farms, all the animals are like so close together, and they're living not in grass, they're not grazing, you know what I mean? They're living in these little pens, and they're just stuffed with disgusting grains, right? They're eating corn. There's too much corn in the world. Anyways, they're eating like corn and stuff, and like things that aren't even nutritious at all. And then they're getting pumped full of antibiotics so they don't get sick, because they're all like, think about wounds, and like their feet are bleeding probably because they're like they're on metal, not grass. And their quality of life is terrible, and there's all these like feces around them and disgusting, and then we eat that, and we're like, that animal wasn't treated good, and we're about to put that in our body. That's not good for us, Like, even if you don't care about animals or how they're treated, take that out of it. If you care about yourself and you're eating this meat, like, you're taking a lot of drugs that everything that animal ate is going into you too, So, and yeah, it's just, once reading about that, I was like, I'm done. I can't. And eating good quality meat is better, because like, that animal probably had a better quality of life, and they were eating nutritious food, and they weren't getting pumped full of like antibiotics. But unfortunately, that's like expensive, and not everyone can afford that.
Right.
And that's the other problem, is that people don't know that animals are getting treated like that, or they don't know that the animal's like getting pumped full of drugs, So it's,
yeah, I just wanted to intersect and be like, I feel like with our generation in particular, it's kind of hard to not know these things, right? Because like, there's social media, there's like internet, communication is so streamlined now and transparent. It's up to you to actually dissect that information, because I'm sure like everyone and anyone who's heard of Netflix or uses Netflix has seen those documentaries or has seen clips of that going around. Because I remember it was like it turned a lot of people vegan. I just remember that. It was a couple years ago. I can't remember the documentary, but I think a couple of clips were going around just like on Instagram or Facebook. And I think if you're saying that you didn't know this, I think at this point it's kind of like, well, how do you not know this? Because the information is everywhere. But again, like if you didn't know, I think it's like up to you to like educate people around you who may not know as well. But with that being said too, what would people need to like look for in terms of like, because I always see like, oh, so antibiotic free whatever chicken, because I love chicken. And whenever I'm trying to shop, like I'm trying to see whether it's organic or antibiotic free. And sometimes I just don't know what terminology to look for. So do you have like suggestions or like things that people should be looking out for when they are shopping for meat?
Yes. Okay, I have like a few things to say about
Yeah.
that too. I I agree that people should, like, at least younger generation should know,
Mhm.
but older generations may not know, so it's important
Right.
that we educate them. And it's also, I remember like after like reading all these things, I was like, they should just, because at like supermarkets sometimes they have like pictures of happy cows. I'm like, that is not how the cow live. They should have a grotesque, like they should have disgusting photos
I know.
on each. And if your meat's from somewhere happy with a happy cow, put the happy cow. But if this cow wasn't from a happy place, like put the reality of what it is on there.
I know. This ties into like, this is so unrelated, but I know that either in Australia or like New Zealand, when you buy cigarettes, they put like a picture of like a grotesque lung to
Yeah,
show you like what you're doing to your body. They should do the same thing with food, to be honest. Like,
they should put someone with like a gross heart or something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
'Cause that's the reality of what meat, if a lot of meat will do to you. But I agree with that.
personal
Yeah.
opinions.
But also going back to what you were saying or the
Yeah.
question you asked, just reading um the meat, like make sure to read, and then if you want to go further, look up the farm where you're buying it from. Do a
Mhm.
little research. And if you have the means, try buying like local livestock. That might be a little expensive. I don't know how much that would cost. I have no idea. But if you have the means, and I know you can buy like half a cow or something. I don't know. I know there's ways of doing that, but I don't buy meat, so I don't really know. But
True.
yeah, but I know there's ways. And like maybe Kiran, if you like chickens, you should maybe like raise some chickens and then kill them yourself. But that's really extreme. That is so extreme, and I don't expect that from anybody, but like
Yeah.
along the in your life, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that I do want to touch on the whole idea of like income when it comes into play with agriculture, because I know we're going to touch on this in a second too, but how much you can actually spend on food or food for your or provide for your family in that way impacts your decision to be more humane with your meat or with your shopping habits. So I guess like before we jump into that, actually, do you want to touch on some more like, since we just talked about like the whole issue with what's going on in the farming with livestock, with plants and everything, do you want to touch on some good farming practices that maybe we're not aware of, or maybe we have talked about it already, but just so that, we
Yeah.
know.
Um Before I jump to that, I did
Yeah.
want to talk about one other thing. I want to talk about Monsanto. Did I already talk about Monsanto?
I'm not sure. I don't think you brought it
Okay.
up yet. Yeah.
I want to talk about Monsanto, and because they also own like a lot of industrial farming and like
Okay.
all of that, and they have a huge impact in seeds. So before I get into the good stuff, the important thing to think about is what Monsanto is doing to like currently with seeds, and
Hmm.
it's really scary. Um, Seeds are really important for our world and like food, because that's where we get our food from is seeds.
Right.
And seed saving for farmers is so important, like, because seeds will adapt to your environment that you're in, and like they'll change from um, season to season. Like if you have seeds, they'll know that they can like adapt to pests, they can adapt to the climate. And Monsanto, which is like a huge corporation, is terrible, and they have ties with the government, all that. They make Roundup Ready seeds, which is seeds that are can only be they put patents on seeds too. So they own seeds. They own their own seeds first off, and then they have Roundup Ready seeds, which are used. They're genetically modified, and they're used. They can be used with pesticides, and the pesticides won't hurt the seed, but they'll hurt all the weeds around them. And they have patents on those, and farmers are not allowed. The farmers cannot use. They have to sign a contract when they get the seeds, and they cannot use those seeds for more than one season. And they get tricked. Monsanto people will come door to door to farming towns globally, and sell their seeds, and they'll say, oh, it's so good, like they're gonna trick the farmers because farming's hard, and like people want to make money, and they're like, okay, I have this opportunity, and then they can't use those seeds the next season, so they lose money, and they kill their soil because they have to use a bunch of pesticides, and it's terrible. And in India, actually, there was a lot of farmer suicide happening. There was a big, and it's terrible. And like Monsanto is another form of imperialism going into like different countries and doing that because the farmers couldn't reuse their seeds. And that's how it's like, how are you supposed to farm if you can't reuse your seeds? And now they have like their land is like, the soil's bad and all this stuff, and it's terrible. So
yeah. No, definitely. I think you just touched on something important I wanted to actually touch on, which was like the farmers' protests that were going in India. Like, I don't want to get too political, but
yeah.
Because a lot of people were asking me to address this or talk about it, like not on the podcast, but just were reaching out to me because I'm Indian, so they think I know. And I do for the most part, but it has to do with this whole idea of like your government controlling your food source, which I think the government should help farmers by like donating or like, providing them with like benefits or whatever that they need when their harvest isn't as much as they need to sustain their living, right? But what I think was trying to happen in India with the protests too is like the government wants to pretty much make it the streamlined system of we're going to give you seeds, we're going to give you this, and then you sell the product to us, and then we sell it in an equal market value place. So they're trying to paint it as this thing of like, oh, we're going to make sure so farmers can't outbid each other, they can't overcharge people, all of that. But the issue is if all the farmers agreed to do this, the government can overcharge you now. Like there's no place to find cheaper vegetables or food or whatever you're trying to do. And so the protest has been happening, especially because in India, especially in the Punjab area, which is like a huge farming community, like everyone there farms. There was protests happening because they knew for a fact that suicide rates are extremely high because like these companies, these corporations, and the government supports them, right? They come in and then they like trick you into doing some sort of like, oh, this is going to make you quick cash, this is going to make you super successful. It doesn't happen, and now they can't provide for their family, they can't provide for their community, and so they end their lives. Like it's a huge issue, and because they noticed this, their prime minister was trying to push this bill that they never even got a chance to talk about. They were trying to put this into place, and that's why the farmers were protesting this, because there's already like shitty stuff happening with the farming in India, and now it's even worse because like the government's trying to force laws that would like give them full control over the surplus of food in India. And I think just in general, how you feel about your government from wherever you're listening about this, I don't think government should have anything to do with food. You should do food regulation, but I don't think they should have control over who they're making grow this food or who they're making. Like, does that make sense? Like, I don't think they should have control over like partnering with these private corporations to do this shady shit.
No. Yeah, and that's what our government does too. So
there's like
they're all so interconnected,
There's like conspiracies where they're like, oh, there's like these billionaires that are tied into this, and they just want to do like a government controlled there's like conspiracies. I'm not going to go into it, but like there's so much shady shit when it comes to agriculture and how important it is for every society, you know?
Yeah, because well, yeah, like America's agriculture or the United States' agriculture right now is just based on colonialism. It's based on stolen land, then genocide, slavery.
Mm-hmm.
There's modern day slavery happening in the agriculture. So it's like what? It's really important to know where your food comes from, and it's hard, and it's out of the way, but it's definitely worth it to start thinking about. And it's definitely a privilege to even think about like where your food comes from and be able to question, where does this meat come from? Where are the.
Right.
Yeah. But it should be like, to me, it should be required that where your produce comes from and where your meat comes from has a list of all the chemicals and everything that was used on it, and like that information should be easily accessible, and it's not.
Right.
So, but on a brighter note, there's like a lot of positive things with agriculture too. There's a lot of like positive practices to do with agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Think locally. Buying locally if you can, and like going to I know everyone says this, go to your local farmers market, but go to your local farmers market and check out what they have. Ask the people questions. Don't be afraid to like ask, oh, like, what do you use for your pest management? It's like, what are you using and stuff, and they'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. Because there's a lot of fun things happening in agriculture today too. Like there's vertical farming in urban spaces. So I know there's one. I was actually looking for a job. I was like looking at jobs, and I forget what's the name of it. I wrote it down. Plenty. Have you heard of that company?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard of it though, but what is it?
It's like their vertical farming, urban like vertical farming company, and they in the Bay Area.
That sounds familiar.
And it's cool if you go on their website. I don't know that much about it. I've just like seen it. I haven't done extensive research on it,
Mm-hmm.
but it looks really crazy. It looks very new. Yeah. Clean. Like it's all about the technology, and it's very like clean looking, and a lot of it's done with robots. There's people too, but a lot of like monitoring the water levels and stuff. And all that happens. But it's cool.
Gotcha.
But there's also just like old school versions of farming that's good for the earth, that's not Eurocentric. It's I don't know, have you heard of permaculture?
Probably
So
not.
Permaculture is kind of a lifestyle too. When you hear people talk about it, it's like permaculture is a way of living, but I'll just give a brief like overview of it. And it's basically having plants like growing and letting things be. It's like it's looking at land, and it's thinking of it in an ecological way. There's also agroecology too, is another. Permaculture embodies agroecology, but it's looking at the land and looking at how everything interacts and working with the land to grow and get the best results possible. So it's looking at where the sun hits and like, okay, I know this plant needs a lot of sun, so I'm going to put it here. I know the ground might be like slanted a little bit, and so I'm going to plant these plants that need more water at the bottom and ones that need less at the top, and then I'm gonna let the water fall, right? It's working smarter, not harder.
There we go.
And it's just like putting that, things that make sense and not so much focused on weeds. There's a whole thing about, is it really a weed? Is it really, do we really hate weeds? Like, what is a weed? It's not so much caring about like all of that. It's more of looking at how things work together. And it's like, okay, I know there's a pest. Can I plant something else? Like, can I plant an herb that will deter this bug that really likes this? It's like, oh, should I plant these flowers to bring bees to pollinate?
Right.
It's looking at the whole picture and trying to implement natural ways and natural like pest management ways, and it's better.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to use pesticides and all that stuff.
No, definitely. Okay, cool. And then just before we like go into another topic, is there a way, I know you just brought up like the company Plenty and how they're using technology, but is there a way that technology can be incorporated so that we're working with our environment and with nature versus like, I don't know, not with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you mean like in a natural setting, or natural? What's natural?
Yeah, no, like
like in a traditional farm setting using technology, or do you mean like
like with I think what you mentioned, I think with Plenty, like we'd have to look more into this and definitely do your own research if don't take our word for it, but the idea of this being like a science, right, and working smarter not harder, technology could play like a role in how much a plant, if it needs a lot of sunlight, how are we making sure it's just getting that much and not like overheating, or the amount of water a plant requires versus maybe other plants. Because I know so far when people think of like technology, they're probably, at least I think of tractors or like ways to actually like harvest the crops, but is there a way that we can incorporate technology so that we're making sure the plants are growing?
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't know that much. Like I haven't done my research too extensively in this, but what I do know is that now, like in indoor facilities, so like the vertical farming's all indoor, and it's all like on robotic scale. So they're like testing the water levels for the plants. They're looking at how much sunlight they're getting. They're doing all that, and it's like cutting back on potential waste, like, or because farming takes a lot of water, right?
Right.
And with more technology, like it is possible to like irrigation will get better and all that and stuff. So yes, in some ways, but I just don't know. The only things I do know about is like vertical farming and like hydroponics.
Right.
But I would assume like in the future it'll get more crazy.
Right.
With the technology and like monitoring and stuff. But
right.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like an outdoor like way of like making sure testing everything. I don't know.
Got it.
Maybe.
Awesome. Things to think about. Okay. So I know we've touched on this too a little bit earlier with like food security, food justice and everything, but do you want to go more into depth about like how it's an issue, but like why is this such a, like how does this impact how the US in particular handles its agricultural system? Like how do those things play a part? Or maybe you could talk about like the difference between them, maybe.
How agriculture and
how maybe, because there's a lot of terminology that's used, right? Like food security or food injustice, food sovereignty. Like what do those mean?
Okay.
And how does that play? Why is it
important
tied into agriculture, I guess?
Okay. So agriculture, first we'll go into agriculture and people who work in agriculture, like farm workers, that's like hard work right there, and are very underpaid.
Right.
And even with another part of industrial farming is the labor. There's human rights issues within the labor, and also with like uh, the farming, the industrial farming with animals. The people who work in slaughterhouses like have terrible jobs. Like people get like their hands cut off. Like it's crazy, and it's like, yeah, like that's a whole like issue in its own. So also doing your research on where you're buying your food from and making sure that the workers are getting paid like a fair wage, and not buying produce that's not used with pesticides, because those pesticides um, can give you cancer and give a lot of farm workers cancer, and also hurt the surrounding communities. There's a lot of cases where there's no clean water in farming communities. There's clean water for the crops, but there's no clean water for the people that live there, who work there. So so many human rights issues.
Right.
And so that's an issue. And then going into like people eating food too, it's so we have like food insecure first, like do you have food? And hold on, let me pull up my notes.
Yeah. Because I always hear like food injustice or food justice or food sovereignty, and I know it's important, but I always can never like differentiate or like understand them as well as I feel like I should.
So a great resource for looking at like the different what I look at too, and that I've gotten like a lot of my information from, is from Food First Institute for Food and Development Policy, and the one that talks about food security, food justice, or food sovereignty, which is the title, is volume 16, number 4, by Eric Holt Jimenez. And in there, they give a really great rundown of basically like food and kind of like the history of food politics and where like movements are. So they talk about, like food enterprise. What's food enterprise? That's like very corporate, like World Bank, all these foundations that's corporate, and like they increase like industrial food farming, because so you remember when we were younger, and like I don't know if it's still, I feel like it was talking about when we were younger, but it was like, oh, there's no food, there's like world hunger, all that, right? And we're trying to fight world hunger.
Right.
The thing is, there's so much food in the world. We have enough food in the United States to feed everyone, like that is not the problem. It's the way that food is distributed, which is the problem. It is not that we don't have enough food. Like industrial farming has a crazy amount of food, but it's not sustainable. There's a lot of issues with it, obviously.
Right.
So that whole idea is like bullshit, okay? So, and then you have food security, which is like very mainstream known, like it's promoted by similar, like food security is just making sure that people have food. It's not worrying about what kind of food people get usually, right? It doesn't care about like if it's organic, if it's just about getting people like to food.
Right.
And then you have food justice, which follows a more like fair trade movement. Like you have your slow food movement. CSAs, which is like community food security movement. Then you have like you start caring more about land, food access, better wages for your employees,
Mhm.
and then right to food, all of that. And then you have food sovereignty, which is what you should strive for. And it's like having people taking power over their food, basically. And that's where you have like dismantling corporations, monopolies, community rights to water and seeds, and it's basically bringing the food back back to the people and having the food from the people to the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you strive for, and also like it goes in with like land rights, recognizing whose land you're on. A lot of most of our food probably comes from unrecognized, like stolen land, and it's about like bringing the food back to the people. So we
Right.
try for food sovereignty.
Mhm.
And also, there's a. Have you heard of Via Campesina?
I don't know anything, to be honest. That's why you're here.
Okay, well, they are great. Like, if you or anyone listening wants to check out like their website,
Mm-hmm.
it's great. It's like an indigenous movement. It's like a global movement.
Oh.
It's
Mm-hmm.
about reclaiming land and uh, farmers' rights around the world.
Right.
Uh, because, like you were saying earlier about India and stuff, that's like a worldwide problem with the governments trying to interfere with like indigenous communities and like farming communities that have been doing what they're doing for years, generations. So
Right.
yeah, they're really cool. Check them out. They're definitely like food sovereignty max.
Right. And then I just wanted to say we'll link everything in the description in case like we aren't mentioning any websites right now. Like in case you want to check this out further, we'll definitely link this in the description.
Yeah. Um,
But yeah,
but
thank you
yeah.
for clarifying all
Yeah.
of that too. I want to move on to the next topic, which is food systems and your carbon footprint. We've touched on this a little bit with like, if you shop local, like the benefits of that. But if you were explaining this to the older generation, because I think our generation, for the most part, because information is very clear to us, like we're able to get it. I'm not saying that our generation is like not to blame for a lot of the issues happening, but if you were to like explain this to an older, maybe like I don't want to name a generation, but like if you were to explain this to like our parents or like our grandparents, how would you go about explaining how or what the carbon footprint is and how where we get our food impacts it? Because I don't think it's very clear to a lot of people of like what's wrong with shipping our watermelons from Mexico, right? Like why do we have to buy local watermelons?
Yeah. So it's all about the fossil fuels, the carbon. It's all about how much that everything goes into it. So I was talking about like the nitrogen, like going back to like the farm and like pesticides. Those are created through fossil fuels, which is bad for the environment. All this has to do with oil. It all goes back to how the oil, and the carbon getting used to transport, to not only grow the food somewhere far away, then you have to, the transportation's in place, right? And so how much fossil fuels, how much emissions is it giving off? And then packaging, think about all the packaging, plastic that goes into like, that goes like there's things, I don't know if you ever see, like sometimes you see like Dole bananas in plastic bags. Do you ever see that? Yeah, I like grocery outlet. um See, like all of that's all emissions, and that your carbon footprint is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And meat has something to do with that too, because so cows like fart, you know, and they're giving off methane. I don't know, have you ever seen those videos of like they have like balloons, they cut out like a piece of the cow's stomach and they have like a balloon and the methane is like coming out of them. Like they have a lot of gas, and that, and all those farms that have like a bajillion cows or whatever, all that methane is going up and going up and going up. And it's like our society is so attracted to meat, and meat's good, but maybe everyone should just have a cow or something. Obviously, that's, you can't do that. But these are all the things these are all the things you have to think about when you're thinking about the food you're eating, even the clothes, everything. Like if you ever, everything you buy, just look at where was it made, you know, and staying local not only helps lower your carbon footprint, it also helps your local economy grow, you know. It helps the people that you care about the most. And like, if you don't want, okay, the burden's not all on one person, but don't be the problem, be the solution. Shop locally. Yeah. It's hard though. Like I all these things I'm saying is like, I have to remind myself all the time to do these things too. Like nothing's easy. Nothing just fixes automatically. And yeah. But yeah, like just look at where all your produce comes from at least, and try to make things more from scratch, even though that's hard, and like you might be busy at least like once a week or something, you know?
Yeah. Got it. Actually, just to touch on that too, like, well, I don't know if this was, nah, you know what? I'm going to ask it right before we go into the next topic. But you know how like there's these produce or like their food delivery systems or something, like you know HelloFresh, right? I think that's like a huge popular one. I just thought of this right now, but I wish I looked this up before. How do we know if those companies, like, they're shopping locally, or if they're, you know, respecting our values? Because I'm assuming that it might be local because of like the quality of the food that's being brought in. But then again, I'm not 100% sure. It could be brought in from somewhere else. But do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Those also use, my friend, like her godmother has like purple carrot, which is one of those. And
Oh yeah.
her godmother doesn't eat all them and gives them to her, and then she gives me them too because there's just like so many. And I've actually I've never even researched where their produce comes from, and I should definitely do that. But I do know, so in Oakland there's a local produce, like it's called, have you heard of Fat Beet Farms?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have their own like box that they make, and I don't know the details on it. I can look it up right now.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to figure out, because I know these like options for, you know, like we're gonna deliver this to you and you can make it at your house. It's cheaper, like a meal plan type of thing. It seems cheap, but then it's like, if it's cheap, like where's the produce coming from? Because if it's local, shouldn't it be pricier? Like
exactly, those are the kind of questions to ask. You know, that's the right thinking, Kiran. And
I'm proud of myself.
You will have to do your own research.
Yeah, definitely.
Like having to look up, maybe even calling, you know, like being that person.
Right.
Like, that's always a good thing too. Is like once you start asking questions, or like not annoying, but like calling companies and asking, they'll start to get like, more people ask questions. They have to like have answers eventually, you know?
That's true.
And there's things like, if a lot of people ask companies for something, they'll do it. Like if there's a high demand for something, you know, capitalism, if there's a high demand, like it has to be met.
True.
So that's how, like, I can't eat gluten, and I'm always embarrassed, but my mom always asks, like when we go to restaurants, she's like, ask for see if they have gluten-free bread or something, you know? And I'm always like, I don't want to. She's like, but you have to, because if you ask, like if more people ask, then like they'll eventually get it, you know? And that's just, no,
you shouldn't be embarrassed about that. You should demand it. Like, come on, I'm spending my money. I want some gluten-free options.
I know. I'm always like, I have to not eat gluten. I promise. Because it's such like a trend, it was such a trend, and it's like, I'm not trying to be annoying.
No, but I think
Can't process.
I'm kind of glad it became a trend because I don't, well, maybe you can answer this, but like I don't know if that was a thing where like they had options or substitutes for people who were lactose or gluten or had, some sort of like actual dietary restriction versus it being like, I choose not to do this now. But like, did it becoming a trend maybe help?
I definitely think it did.
Maybe
And
more.
like it became a trend because more and more people couldn't eat, like can't process it, because that's how processed all our food
Right.
is wheat is so processed that when we eat it, it's just like it's so dense in our body, and like my
Right.
body just can't process anymore. My stomach lining or whatever happens in there just can't. But yeah, no, it's definitely taken off a lot. I have one of my good friends I've known since I was like high school. Her sister and her couldn't eat gluten from when they were babies, and her mom had to
Mm.
figure it all out by herself. And yeah, like I've talked to her about it, and she was just telling me about how crazy it was. Like she would go into like, I don't know, she would go the extra 20 miles to figure out gluten free things, and like find out all the information that's so easily accessible now. So
Mhm.
it is a good thing. Like trends do make things better. Like even like the vegan trend, um, is kind of better, for better or worse. There's
Mhm.
more options out there. You know?
Right. Awesome. Cool. So before we jump into some fan questions, do you want to answer like this question of what are ways that we can become more sustainable in our everyday lives? Like if people had to start right now,
Okay.
what could they do?
Um, Start trying to shop locally.
Okay.
Like, look up farmers market and see if you can go to one that's near you. That may not be something you can do because you may have to work, you may have to like take care of somebody. It just might not be a thing. So if you can't do that, try going to your supermarket and seeing if there's anything locally that's that have anything local there. Another thing. And just start doing like small things like bringing your own bags to the not using as much plastic. It's just so hard. I have so much plastic in my house and I hate it. I like look around and I'm just like plastic, or
Yeah.
like some like or be at well, at like grocery stores how they have like the produce bags and they're the
I
plastic.
know.
Uh,
I hate using those too. And I have like a reusable one, right? And I always forget to take it whenever I'm at the store. And I hate it. And because like you kind of need that like protection for some of the items, but it's like I try to opt for not using it, but it's the worst. Yeah.
I know, I find the same problem. I have to have the key is to have them like in your bags, like just have
Yeah.
them just like ready, because that's what I fall into too. And then like other people, that I live with don't follow by the same rules, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so much plastic. I'm like, you are, but it's
Yeah.
not, it's more,
Yeah.
and all these things are just like systemic problems too that we need to like work on. Like, another good resource that I found was it's this little like zine. I have it here,
Mhm.
and it's called "From Banks and Tanks to Corporation and Caring." Oh, Cooperation and Caring, not
Mhm.
cooperation. A strategic framework for a just transition, and in this little zine, like they talk about how our economy is set up right now, and we're set up around like um, consumerism, colonial mindset, you know, enclosure of wealth and power. Our governance is militarism, and our resources are from extraction, like from oil. So we're digging, burning, and dumping, and then our work is very it like exploits everyone, you know. So how do we move away from that to a society that's here they have another little that a worldview that is caring and everything's on cooperation and all that. Like our world's very messed up from a systemic point of view. So the more that we try and do things that are anti that, the better it will become. You know what I mean? So like opting out of all the corporation things, like really trying not to support those businesses, and looking at your local community, and yeah, just supporting them instead, because change happens in local government before it happens in big government, you know?
Right.
So be radical, I don't know. In little ways, you know?
Yeah. No,
Even if that is like bringing your own bag, you're like, I'm radical because I'm not using plastic, so.
Right. And I think like from my point of view, I have no credentials to say this, but like do your own research, because I know we just talked about a bunch of stuff too. And if you found something fascinating, definitely look at our resources that we're going to link, but then also like dive deeper into it, because I don't know. I think the fact that you clicked on this episode probably to like listen to this just shows that you're interested and you're trying to, push for this, or you care, right? And so keep continuing to do your research, because I think that's the only way we can, if we know about it and we know what to do, then we can make change. If we didn't,
Yeah.
we can't do anything, right?
Yeah, that's how it is. It's really just educating yourself and like really going out of your way. And we have like the internet at our fingertips. Like we have no excuse. My mom always would tell me that. She's like, you can literally look up anything on Google. Like don't even. You're like, we used to have to use an encyclopedia. Like
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, yeah, that would suck. So yeah. Just keep asking questions. I would say like always ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask people like where you're shopping, where you're going. Just keep asking questions and like write them down or something, you know?
Right.
We get so used to like being in our daily lives that we just accept everything, and it's like, no, don't accept that. And also it's like do it for the people that can't, because there's a lot of people out there who like can't get out of, who are like working, shitty labor jobs, and it's up to us too. It's like our responsibility too, if you have the privilege to like not support bad companies and like do the research and make the change,
Right. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to jump into some fan questions. And if you ever want to submit your own, follow us on Instagram at 98.podcast. If you don't use social media like Tessa, you can always like contact us. We have an email that I never put out there publicly for some reason, but it's just 98.podcast@gmail.com. And you can check out our website. You can contact us through there, through LinkedIn. Just figure out a way to get us your questions. But anyways, so these were people who submitted these questions on Instagram. The first one being, does shopping local or organic help with this issue? And we already answered this, but what is your answer?
Yes, it does. Do it.
Do it. Okay.
At least sometimes.
Yeah, as much as you can, definitely. Yeah. Cool. Next question. What helps? Oh, wait. Ugh. What happens to extra produce or surplus?
Oh, okay. So I'm not super well educated in this, but I do know a little bit. And I know that there is a lot of food waste out there, and that all the foods that you see in the supermarkets, those were handpicked because those are pretty, and pretty sells. So produce from a farm, if you go to like a local farm or whatever, they don't look like that. Like at the USF Garden, if you live in San Francisco, you maybe not, or if you have like access to a local like the garden, go look at the food there, because that food does not look like how it looks in a supermarket. Mm-hmm. And anything that doesn't look pretty, that does not look pretty, is not going to be put out, because we're like, ew, we're so like conditioned to be like, oh my God, carrot is bent, ew, I'm not gonna eat this. Like, why is it so gross? You're like, this apple's a weird shape, that looks gross, ew, I'm not like, how many, like, I have done that too in my life, I've been like, ew, why does it look like this? But it's just because we're so conditioned to think that produce comes out looking like perfect, you know,
Mhm.
and it doesn't. It's not. So all that produce that's perfectly fine to eat gets thrown out. You know, sometimes maybe they'll get fed to livestock, hopefully, you know, but a lot of times just gets, there's so much. And you know, like it's back to this whole idea that there's like that world hunger is something we need to beat. And it's like it could be beat, you know? Just all this food goes to waste. So yeah, I would do like, even I should do more research on, I bet there are places maybe where you live where you can buy access, or even like get for free maybe excess produce. I know in SF for at USF I used to be part of this club. I'm blanking on the name of it, and it was like um, I forget, but we would go give food. We would like get food that was left over from the the cafeteria at our school, and then also from down in Bayview in SF. That's where all like the big industrial like food places are, and they give it to like, they have wholesale produce, and we would get excess wholesale produce from there to make food too. So that would be worth something looking into, like where they're like wholesale, where they sell like wholesale produce, and like how do you get that excess produce, because they throw out a lot of produce.
Yeah. That was a good question. It's
Good question.
a very sad question, but yeah. Next question is, does veganism solve the problem? We've touched on this a little bit, but do you want to explain?
Yeah. Veganism is cool, and it's cool for a lot of different reasons. One is, you know, your body probably doesn't need as much meat as the US society tells you, right? Because in all the commercials, like if you're watching a football game, what are you gonna see? You're gonna see, oh, like commercials for all this food, and it's all gonna be burgers, ribs, it's like sausages. And yeah, they may taste good, but your body doesn't need that much meat, first off. But also, veganism. Okay, let me go back. That question, like, yes, okay, veganism could solve the problem if you're thinking about like in an environmental way, because yes, livestock does produce a lot um, of like, it gives off a lot of like methane, all that stuff that's going into climate change. But it's not just one thing that's going to solve it. And if you want to be vegan, that's great, but that doesn't mean, like, being vegan doesn't mean that like you're all of a sudden in like the most like sustainable person ever, you know what I mean? Because I know a lot of bad vegans out there that and like it's all about just shopping locally. And like, as for meat, maybe if you eat a lot of meat, maybe consider cutting back on your meat consumption, you know, or having like a few days out of the week where you don't eat meat. Because I think once you start doing that, you're opening your mind to the possibility that, hey, maybe my body doesn't need this much meat. And you can also incorporate other foods into your diet that you didn't try before. You know, I get stuck in like food that I make. I'm like, I've been making the same dish for a while, you know? So maybe once a week really try and like experiment with like vegetarian meals or vegan meals, you know, not eating and trying to buy like local, or here's another thing, native things that are native to your location, like plants that are native to your location. Yeah, that would be cool. That would be really going out of your way. If you look up, that's a challenge. Yeah, you should look up, or you do whatever you want, but if you want to challenge yourself, look up native plants, native edible plants in like where you live, and try to make a meal out of that. Yeah, that would be really cool. Because then you're like using what's naturally growing, and yeah, nothing better than that.
Yeah. A lot to go off today.
What?
There's a lot to go off of today.
I know. I feel like I just like so much information. I'm sorry if anyone listening is overloaded.
I think no. No, I think especially for me, I think this was like a good episode to kind of like educate anyone who even feels like they know somewhat, but then they don't know enough or don't even know where to get started, right? Like we've talked about a bunch of things of like the history of agriculture, right? Is particularly the European, right, centric industrial. Yeah. Different farming methods, livestock, technology, food security, justice, sovereignty, carbon footprint. There's so many things we talked about today. So hopefully there's something that caught your attention and you can look up more information on too. I think that's the great thing about podcasts and having people on that know so much about a particular topic. Like I love bringing people on who are specialized in specific topics, right? So thank you, Tessa, for being on and educating us and bringing more things to our attention that we probably weren't thinking about, right? I just want to wrap up by first asking you if you have any advice or any last minute things you want to recommend for anyone listening. That could be like reading materials, documentaries, or ways they can be better. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Ask questions, always question everything. Like
yeah.
any products, because this goes like what we talked about today goes into every aspect of our lives, right? Like even from the clothes we wear, the makeup we put on our face, the everything. Like where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Was the people who made it being treated ethically, and like was this sustainably made, or like, you know, like were there a lot of chemicals that were made? Because the answer is probably yes to a lot of that, or like not. Well, you know what I mean. Like it's probably like yes, they used a lot of chemicals. Yes, the workers were treated badly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a surprising amount, and like just trying maybe to buy secondhand things or local, and always just trying to keep challenging yourself to do new things and try harder to be more local based and sustainable based.
Mm-hmm.
And also looking at your local community for support. Like there's a lot of resources that you can be found like locally too, and like in SF, like if you're SF based, I'm just saying SF because I'm in SF. So like I listen to 89.5 KPOO, and they have like so many great resources on there like all the time, and a lot of great hosts. So it's just like that, and like looking at, oh, do I have any community gardens? Like, can I just go walk through it? Maybe like it can be intimidating. I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by environmentalism or whatever, but it's not, because we're all like we are in environment. We are the environment. So this is your life. Like take control out of it, you know?
Right.
And only good things can happen if you try, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you, Tessa. Thank you so much for being on. This was super helpful. Please come back when you want to share anything else about the environment. I feel like I only have like 2 friends that are environmentalists. But if you have any recommendations too for people or anyone, I'd love to learn more. I feel like there's so many aspects, right, of environmentalism and sustainability, and agriculture is just part of it. So yeah. But yeah, what were you gonna say? Any recommendations for
I would say things to check out. Oh yeah, I already said La Via Campesina, which is like something to look at, and then Science Daily is also a good website to look at to keep yourself updated. And what else? SF Environment if you're in SF.
right?
Very like just look up like just Google search like local environmental things, and I'm sure something will pop up. And also yeah, like reading material. Kiran, I told Kiran what kind of I talked about and like what things I'm off, so she'll link that. Check out that. Also, the only thing that's coming to my mind right now for some reason is Silent Spring, because that goes off like the Green Revolution and like how they put this one pesticide, I think it's called DDT, and how that like killed a bunch of animals and like what we learned from that. So that's kind of an interesting read too. But there's a lot out there.
Right.
I'm like blanking on a lot right now, but
yeah,
there's too much.
No, for sure. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Sorry if I was overload of information. I hope I didn't just like
scare anyone off.
so much to talk about. I'm like, I gotta fit everything in.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you did a really good job at like condensing a lot of the information. And again, if you want to learn more, connect with Tessa, right?
Yeah, you can ask me. I need to learn more too. So if you have anything I said and you're like, wait, I know this, like let me know.
Right. Definitely.
Down to learn.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for listening and tuning in for this episode. Again, for more information on Tessa, check out our Instagram. DM us if you want to get in touch with her. She's not on the social platforms except for LinkedIn, right? But in case you want to learn more, definitely DM us, contact us. But yeah, thank you again, Tessa, for being on. Thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, bye-bye.